Peyton was about to be hanged, but he was calm, thinking of a way to escape. He measured the height above the water of the bridge, then looked around him. There were soldiers with guns everywhere. Not only were the sides of the bridge guarded, there were also soldiers on the hillside, and not far away, there were cannons standing by. In order to be absolutely sure, the soldiers tied his hands and feet tightly. At that moment, the officer looked at the position of the sun. It's almost time. He signaled the soldiers to get on the pedals. This was the end of the line. Peyton knew the chances of escaping were slim to none. He closed his eyes in despair. He couldn't help but think of his wife and daughter. They were waiting for him to come home, and that made it even harder for him to die. Suddenly, the soldiers shook him awake. The clock was taken out of his pocket. Then the officer took it for himself, thinking he was going to die soon. Peyton became nervous. He was shivering all over. He twisted his hands as hard as he could, but it was in vain. At the signal of the gallows officer, the soldier quickly released the pedal, but the next moment the rope snapped. Peyton fell into the water. He was disoriented for a moment. When he reacted, he began to struggle. First, he untied his hands, then he took the rope off his neck. At this point, he could no longer hold his breath. He swam towards the water. When he realized he couldn't hold his breath, he realized that his legs were still tied. He could only work with his hands and feet to break free. He even threw out his shoes. After swimming out of the water, he breathed heavily. After calming his mind and body, he looked around at the lush greenery and the usually insignificant bugs. Feeling the true meaning of life, Peyton wanted nothing more than to live. But soon the soldiers found him. The officers ordered him to be fired upon at all costs. They even used artillery to kill him. When Peyton realized he was being targeted, he had to swim downstream through the hail of bullets. He was in grave danger. Fire! Bullets were hitting Peyton's side. When he was still swimming, the soldiers began to use artillery to bombard him. The shells fell on Peyton's side. Luckily, he only fainted for a few seconds, and then he woke up again. He's been swimming for a long time. Gradually, the sound of gunfire began to diminish. The sound was getting farther away. When he reached the fastest part of the river, he began to swim with the current. After a bumpy ride, he finally came to a flat, low spot and slumped helplessly on the sand. He looked at his injured hand. The pain told him that he was still alive. He was ecstatic, and he kept splashing the sand, celebrating his survival, and he rolled around on the beach and howled loudly. He'd probably never been so scared and happy in his life. Then he crawled over to the flowers and pulled a blooming flower to his face and reveled in it. Probably the best smelling flower he'd ever smelled in his life. Soon a shell fell nearby. This forced him to continue his escape. Even though he was so tired that he couldn't even open his eyes, he didn't dare to stop. Even when he fell, he pushed on with the last of his strength. Finally, he saw the gate of his own manor. He smiled and pushed on with all his strength. Peyton finally saw his wife. He looked at her with tears in his eyes. Peyton was about to wipe away her tears, but suddenly a strong force pulled him down. Peyton is now suspended in the air, and all of this, it was all a fantasy that he had before he died.